لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. May Allah, inshallah, accept from you your fasting, your acts of worship. We're continuing our journey of going through the short surahs of the Holy Quran. Many of these short surahs have vocabulary words that we are not familiar with, and they have stories that maybe we haven't read before. So today we're going to go over one of the surahs that has a lot of new vocabulary words for us that we might not know. And that is the 100th surah of the Holy Quran, Sura Al-Adiyat. Why is it that they say that this surah is linked to Imam Ali alayhi salam? We'll mention it. Why is it in this surah it talks about animals that are racing, for example, and it speaks highly of them. Who are these animals? What happened, for example? And why is it in this surah it talks about that man is ungrateful? And is this our nature? Is it that we're created this way? Is it that man is born negative and has negative attributes? So these are things that tonight we want to address about this surah. When you look at this surah, and it is, we said, the 100th chapter of the Quran. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal-Adiyati dabaha. And it starts with the racers panting. Who are these racers? Now some say, in some of the tradition, it talks about this being a form of animal that is racing, or ado, for example, means to pass something, for example. And it means racing, going fast. It can refer to animals in battle, that they're being used. They can be horses, for example, as some of the traditions say. Or it could be a camel, for example. So, وَالْعَادِيَاتِ ضَبْحًا فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْحًا. Dabha means that noise when an animal is racing fast. Panting, we can translate in English. Is you see when a horse, for example, is being raced and is breathing, exhaling very fast. فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْحًا. And then we go to the next verse. And the producers of sparks when striking. So, generally speaking, this surah, there's a debate as to whether it's from Mecca or from Medina. The reason why do you think it might be from Mecca? The chapters that are in Mecca usually have to do with beliefs, usually have to do with the resurrection. And this chapter talks about the resurrection. So some say it could be about Mecca, life in Mecca. Remember, the 13 years in Mecca was much different than the time where the Prophet moved and did hijrah and migrated to Medina and formed an Islamic government in Medina. When he formed the Islamic government and he had good followers, they began to attack the Prophet, and he had multiple wars and battles. So question for you is this: if this surah is talking about a battle, would it be from Mecca, this surah, or from Medina? It would be from Medina, because the battles that the Prophet took place in, that happened, were in Medina. So therefore some say that this is actually not only it was a battle, it was a specific battle, some of the tafsir say. This was the battle of Dhat al-Salasil. Salasil means change. Silsila means chains. So it was a battle of chains because those who were, conquered and those who, the Muslims were victorious, they took back, say, with chains. What is the story? The Prophet was informed about 12,000, an army of 12,000 riders are coming to attack and trying to assassinate the Prophet and Imam Ali alayhi salam. Then the Prophet sends a group of people to challenge them. The 8th year, the Muslims were numerous. He sends a group of people with the leadership of one person, and they fail. Then the Prophet sends Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Imam Ali, who tonight, we're remembering his martyrdom as well, who today was his martyrdom, and he is victorious. And Imam Ali alayhi salam is victorious. So when the Prophet comes and is performing the prayers in Salat, after Surah Al-Hamd, he does the surah. And the companions are wondering, why did you change? What happened? And he says that, narrated that Jibreel changed. He said, we have never heard this surah before. Jibreel brought me this verse, brought me this surah, and the Prophet said here, Ali alayhi salam has been victorious over his enemies. Wal-Adiyat was because Imam Ali alayhi salam again was victorious in the battle of Dhat al-Salasil. And that night Jibreel brought me this surah with the news. Then Imam Ali, days later, so the Prophet was informed, he does the surah. Days later, Imam Ali comes with the spoils of war. So this is the story of Imam Ali alayhi salam and leading a group of Muslims, and that's why some of the traditions talk about this. It says that man qara'a wal adiyat wa admana qira'ataha, whoever recites Surah Al-Adiyat regularly, Allah will resurrect him on the day of resurrection with Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Wa kana fi hijrihi wa rafaqaihi. He'll be of the friends of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. So this is one of the battles and victories of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in the Quran, according to tafasir and this hadith that we have from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. So let's go through some of the words. We started a little bit. We talked about the occasion of the verse. So first of all, wa in Arabic means qasam. Qasam means an oath or to swear. Allah swears in the Quran by things that are very important, things that are significant. So here, Allah is swearing by wal-adiyati dabha, by the galloping horses or the racing animals that are panting with breath. This is in reality praising the mujahid and the one who fights in the path of Allah. Not only him, Allah is swearing and praising the animal who he's riding, not the mujahid himself. Obviously, that's understood by this. As Allah is praising and swearing by the animal who he's riding. Obviously, the one who is riding the animal has a higher value, obviously, right? Then higher than this, the next verse talks about the fact that فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْهَا, and those striking sparks of fire, meaning that possibly the hooves of the horses, when they're hitting the ground so hard, they're making sparks. So Allah is swearing and praising by that vessel that mujahid is using, the one who is fighting during the Prophet's time for the truth, and therefore swears by it and is praising. And not it's like sometimes you can say, some of the ulama say, sometimes I say, may I be sacrificed for you, which is one thing. Sometimes you say, may I be sacrificed for the feet, for the dirt under your feet, for example. You see the difference? I'll be sacrificed for the dirt under your feet. So I swear not by you, the mujahid, I swear by the horses that you ride. I swear by the hooves that are sparking, I swear by them. To see the significance and the importance of those who fight in the way of Allah. They fight for truth and justice. Then it continues, Quran has, فَأَثَرْنَ بِهِ نَقْعًا, and they raise clouds of dust. Right? These animals that are coming. فَوَسَطْنَ بِهِ جَمْعًا, and they penetrate the midst of the enemy. So therefore, فَالْمُغْرِيَاتِ الصُّبْحَ, I think I forgot this, فَالْمُغْرِيَاتِ الصُّبْحَ. This usually in Arab times, in battles, they would assemble at nighttime and attack in subh, attack in dawn. And that's what Imam Ali alayhi salam did. He went in the middle at nighttime, he called them to Islam. They were going to try to assassinate the Prophet. They were going to try and assassinate Imam Ali, so it was a preemptive strike. They already had a group of people that already went to war with them. So he gathered at night and attacked in the morning. So therefore, you see these few verses at the beginning are about the battle and swearing by these group of people. فَوَسَطْنَا بِهِ جَمْعًا. They penetrate the midst of the enemy, and that's what Imam Ali alayhi salam did. So there's a few things here we understand. One is speed, one is readiness, one is courage, for example. One is a strategic surprise because it was in the morning. These are things that we understand from this verse, these chapters, this chapter, these verses that talk about these very important things. So that is one section of Surah Al-Adiyat, and that is the first, you can say maybe the first few verses of the Holy Quran until verse 5. So again, I'll say, وَالْعَادِيَاتِ ضَبْحًا, by the racers panting, فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْحًا, and the producers of sparks when striking or when riding, فَالْمُغِيرَاتِ صُبْحًا, and the chargers at dawn, فَأَثَرْنَ بِهِ نَقْعًا, stirring up clouds of dust, فَوَسَطْنَ بِهِ جَمْعًا, arriving thereby in the center collectively. 5 verses swearing by, and describing beautifully of courage, of strategy, and how, the proper, mujahid, the proper person like Imam Ali alayhi salam is victorious. Then the Quran switches topics. And it's very interesting because it's only 11 verses long, this surah. Quran suddenly switches to a different topic. But I want you to try to understand how fighting, for Allah is related to this. I want you to try to understand. Then it says, "Innal insan لِرَبِّهِ لَكَنُودٌ." Indeed, mankind to his Lord is ungrateful. So suddenly from war, it goes to what? Ungratefulness. What is the relationship? What is the relationship? One image of swearing and how good even their horses are, praising the horse, and then bashing and bringing down humans. So it's very interesting. Horses and animals that are doing something good are being praised in this surah, but humans, who aren't they supposed to be the best of creation? They are being bashed and saying that insan is ungrateful. Mankind is ungrateful. Why? وَإِنَّهُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ لَشَهِيدٌ, and indeed he is to witness. وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ, that mankind is in love of wealth intense. Interesting word for wealth is khair. A lot of times in the Quran when it comes to money, for example, when somebody leaves wealth, Quran calls it khair, good. Good, sometimes wealth or khair is known as money. So you see here, mankind is ungrateful. He bears witness to this. Why is he ungrateful? Then it says the reason here, we understand, is why? إِنَّهُ لَحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ, because he loves money. I want you to answer this in your minds. What is the relationship between these two parts of the surah? First, battling, courage, strategy, sparks, working very hard. Then the second is being ungrateful. Why? Why were they ungrateful? Because they loved money. So maybe you can answer this question. Why do people not perform jihad? Why, when it is wajib upon people, they don't perform it? When, for example, the Prophet wanted to go to battle, Imam Ali wanted to go to battle, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein wanted to go to battle. Why did some people not join them? The answer is because they love money. The money, the dunya. They love the homes, for example. They love the cars. They love the lifestyle. They really didn't want to go to the hereafter. And the reason for this is, some of the traditions talk about, is because you have built the dunya. You have built this life, so you like life here. You haven't built the hereafter because you like to go where you have built and prepared. So if I haven't prepared the hereafter, I don't want to go to jihad. I don't want to fight. I don't want to say anything that is wrong. I don't want to stand up for the truth because I'm afraid for myself, because I love khair, I love wealth, I love my job, for example. I love my, I have mortgage payments. How can I do this? What do you expect from me? But then that person who doesn't care about any of this and says that, I want to do what Allah commands me. I have no attachments. I might have wealth. might have, for example, blessings from God, but I am grateful. So tonight's discussion in the midst, I'm going to talk about this important topic as to what causes ungratefulness that can later cause a person to neglect the command of God to fight in his path, to strive in his path, for example. When you look at this word, lakanud, or kanud here, that lam is for possibly ta'keed, it means ungratefulness. Quran has a few verses about insan that brings him down. When you look at these, sometimes Quran says, for example, mankind is ungrateful. Sometimes Quran talks about man, some of the scholars say about kanud, means that one who counts his misfortunes but forgets his blessings. Have you ever seen someone like this? He's always complaining what God has done to me, what my life is, but I forget about my blessings, right? Do you like to hang out with such people? No. Do you like to vacation and travel with such people? No. You're going to go travel, you're going to go in the mountains, it's going to be great air, cold, brisk. They're like, oh, I'm car sick. Oh, it's too cramped in the car. Oh, it's too cold. Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, I got to use the restroom, for example. You don't want to go with that person traveling anymore. And Allah doesn't really want to, hear that person make dua and in this manner as well, because that person is ungrateful. Or one who eats alone. Some scholars say kanud means one who eats alone and refuses to share. And Farsi say takhori, for example. Person who, you see him, for example, he's hanging with the friends, suddenly he's gone. You see, where did he go? For example, he's munching on hamburger by himself, for example. What happened? I thought we were supposed to eat together. Or you see him at Jamba Juice or something like that, all by himself, getting his fruit juice. Hopefully not in Shahr Ramadan. Or one who fails to sympathize with his friends in hardship. Some say lakanud means this. He doesn't sympathize with his friends when they're going through difficult times. One whose goodness is very little. One who spends God's blessings in sin. God gives him money. He doesn't pay his homes. He doesn't help out masjid. Doesn't help out the people. And he uses this, God forbid, in haram. Uses, for example, God gives him a nice vehicle car. He goes to haram places with it, for example. It's very interesting here. One of the scholars is talking about the difference between man and animal. And it's not this way that you can say man is always better than animal. Because sometimes Quran talks about like this, talks about the good animal, the horse or camel that's in battle, and then the bad insan who's ungrateful. Sometimes Quran talks about insan being kal an'am, like cattle, or even lower than cattle. If you look at a snake, for example, mankind can actually be worse than a snake. A snake will bite you when you're close to it. Right now, can a rattlesnake bite you? Inshallah, we did a good job checking the pillows and the carpets, inshallah. But generally speaking, a rattlesnake cannot bite you right now because you're not in its territory or you're not walking across it. Even when you walk across, a lot of times it doesn't bite. You're not messing around with it. Then it'll bite. But mankind can bite you 1,000 miles away. He'll make up rumors, for example. He'll, ruin your reputation. He'll, use vulgar language against you, for example, on the telephone. So mankind can be worse than a snake. Mankind can be worse than a bee that stings, or a scorpion, for example, that stings. So don't think that just because we're insan, it means that we're the best of creation. They have two types of verses in the Holy Quran. Some of the verses talk about mankind being as that individual who, for example, is, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي Adam. We have honored, children of Adam. Or sometimes we have verses that talks about mankind is dhalumun jahul. For example, who's oppressive, ignorant. Or is halu'un, who is impatient, for example. And or despairing and ungrateful. So this verse is showing us that, kanud, that not everyone is like this. Those who have not done tarbiyat of themselves, those who have not worked on themselves. And what we mean by working on yourself is divine tarbiyat, divine or holy, working on oneself, training oneself when it comes to what the Prophet said, when it comes to what Imam said, when it comes to Quran says. That person who is not trained by God or prophets, that person can be one who falls in this category. The category that he is oppressive, impatient, despairing, ungrateful. But the one who works on himself, you see, a verse of Quran says, I breathe from my own soul to him. So we have two paths in front of us. If you want to be the one who has worked on himself, you have, kirama and honor. But if you have the one who does not work on themselves, you'll be like, God forbid, like animals, or even worse. Here we come to a nice story, and that is, when we're talking about how can we be less ungrateful, how can we be, more a person who thanks Allah more. Sometimes we think this. We say, God, if you give me a house, I'm renting, if you give me a house, I will worship you so much. If you give me a nice business, I will worship you so much, I'll have everyone. God, if you give me, for example, this car, my dream car, or you allow me just for this, like my dream school. School is good to go to work hard, but just that, you love that football team of that school. You're just attached to the name of that school. It's dunya, it's attachment. I will worship you like nobody else worshipped. This is sometimes we say this. We're waiting for God to give me so much money, so much wealth, then I'll worship you. There's a person in the time of the Prophet, and Shaykh Tabarsi mentions the story of Tha'laba. Tha'laba came to the Prophet and said to the Prophet and asked dua, asked for him for dua, said, give me, for example, wealth. The Holy Prophet says, a little wealth for you, which you can pay thanks, is better than a lot of wealth for which you cannot pay thanks. Very beautiful. And we're talking about thankfulness. If you have a little bit, but you're grateful, that's better for you than a lot that you're not that you will be ungrateful. So then he keeps insisting to the Prophet, pray for me. I want to, today's term, win the lottery, for example. I want to have a huge business, successful business. Again, we're not saying these things are bad, but we're saying that the Prophet is saying a little bit that you're grateful is better than a lot that you're ungrateful. He continues, so finally the Prophet, because he wants this, he makes dua for him, and Tha'laba becomes rich. Tha'laba, a person who is doing congregation prayers, person who comes to Salat Jum'ah, of who? The seal of the messengers, Rasulullah's Salatul Jum'ah, Rasulullah's Jama'ah, Salatul Jama'ah. He says that he has a sheep farm, and his sheep farm is so vast, he cannot fit it in Medina, he has to leave. Now he cannot join the congregation prayers. Imagine seeing Rasulullah. We would sell our own business to be able to, live next to Rasulullah and pray with him and see him every day, right? We would sacrifice whatever we had. But he now, because of his business, has to go to the outskirts of town. No more jama'at, no more Friday prayers. And what happens when you don't see the Prophet that often? What happens when you leave the masjid and you leave and you start indulging in the dunya, till finally they came to him. Okay, that's mustahab, right? Jama'at, is it wajib? No. Well, Friday prayers is, during the time of the Prophet, is wajib, right? He wouldn't come to that. Now it's time for zakat. So you have 40 sheep, you have to give one of them, right? Then they come to him and say, you have to pay your Islamic taxes. He says, no. Just no. Even though he promised Rasulullah, if you look in the beginning of the story, he says that, I promise that, I will, with this wealth, I will, give it to the poor, I'll help people, for example. Then he doesn't even give his zakat. This verse of the Quran comes for him. It says, وَمِنْهُمْ, and see how it's related. You can see, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَحَدَ اللَّهِ, and there are those who promised Allah. لَإِنْ آتَانَا مِنْ فَضْلِهِ, if God gives me from His fadl, God gives me money, لَنَسْتَغَنَّا وَلَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, I will give it as sadaqah and I'll be of the salihin. There's these people, it says, who promise, who did ahad and a covenant, promise that if you make me wealthy, I will do this. Then it says, فَلَمَّا آتَاهُمْ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ, then we gave from his wealth, بخلوا, he was cheap, he was stingy. بخلوا به وتولوا وهم معرضون, and they turned away. So from this lesson we learn this. A lot of times we are waiting for God's blessings. We think God hasn't really blessed us because we live in a time period or area where people are, some of them are very wealthy, right? The city that we live in, we see lots of wealth. So therefore, we are always looking at the people above us and say, well, look at the wealth they have. I don't have anything. So I'm always going to be ungrateful. The lesson that we can learn is this, is that when it comes to wealth, always look at those that are, below you when it comes to wealth. When it comes to worship, always look to those who are above you in worship. Do not compare yourself necessarily with those who are higher to you in wealth. There's a reason why God gives them money. There's a reason why God gives me money. Yes, a lot of it is that I earned it. I worked hard for it, true. But Allah gave me that intelligence. Allah gave me that health. And many times, if I'm going to wait to be grateful to Allah, then many times when that wealth comes to me, I'll notice that I will be distracted. I will, for example, change my circle of friends. I will change my lifestyle. And these same masjid people that I used to know, I don't want to go with them on traveling anymore. I want to go with the super rich and fancy people, for example. So I begin to change. So always, brothers and sisters, think of things as hidayah, as guidance. That God gives you enough that will take you close to Him. But if it's going to separate you from Him, it's not good for you. Does it make sense for you to eat and consume food? For example, and eat more food that you have not digested? First digest that food that you have, then eat more food. Many times, for the blessings that we have today, Quran mentions that you cannot count them. Think of blessings not only as money and wealth, also look at health, for example. Look at your family. Look at, for example, marriage. Look at your parents, for example. Look at your children. Look at your religion and deen. Look, for example, the fact that you don't have addictions, you're not into intoxications. Look at your lifestyle that's healthy. These are blessings of Allah. So for us to be grateful, the first step is to realize these blessings that I have in my life are from Allah. God gave me this. God made me healthy. How many diseases are there right now? How many people right now in our city are sick? So the first thing is, I have to realize this ni'mah is from Allah. 2, I have to take this ni'mah and spend it in God's way. If He has given me a voice, if He's given me health, let me teach people. If He have given me knowledge, let me help some people out. If He has given me wealth, let me perform some charity. The second stage to be someone who is grateful is to spend that ni'mah that I have for Allah. Now, when it comes to Islamic taxes, khums is like 1/5 of your earnings. Allah doesn't say give all of it to me. It says after you spend, after you even go on vacation, khums, a normal vacation. After you bought your house, for example, different things. Now that you have extra money, now you pay your khums, for example. But even that little bit, we don't want to sit down and calculate. We say, no, it's too hard. Why do I need to pay khums? It's even though it's in the Holy Quran, even though we have so many narrations about it, for example. So therefore, brothers and sisters, one of the lessons we can learn from this is that remember that there's this sickness that we have, that this love of wealth is related to being ungrateful. Why is it that we're waiting for something bad to happen to me for me to worship Allah? I'm always waiting like for me to lose a family member, God forbid, or sickness to happen. Now I do dua. Why can't I make dua and pray when everything is okay? Why are we always looking at prayer as something that I just need help? Why can't you do dua and worship like the shakirin and say, Allah, thank you so much for your blessings. I'm going to worship you because of what you've given me. I don't want necessarily anything right now in this world. Everything is good, alhamdulillah, for me. But I just want to worship you, to say thank you. And that is a high maqam if you can reach that position. The maqam that you are not praying necessarily, even though it is good, praying just because I have musibah, because I have difficulty, because I have a specific need, but just praying because I am happy. praying that God has given me so many blessings, that I'm going to do more salat for it. And that was the plan of Thalaba, but he never reached it. So therefore, there's two types of worship. Both of them are good. One is that worship in time of crisis. The other is that worship in times of peace, in times of wealth, in times of health. Which one is more important? If a person remembers God when he's healthy, wealthy, and everything is good, then that is the person that has really taken the blessings of Allah and known and has been grateful. We'll finish, inshallah, this surah because we're running out of time. So therefore, that was one part of the surah. You see that from 11 lines of a short surah, Al-Adiyat, how many different messages there are for us. It just takes someone to look and to try to take a in-depth approach to the Holy Quran, and you find so many lessons. Therefore, we're going to be finishing now, and that is the last part, and that is this. Let's go back to where we were. إن الإنسان لربه لكنود وإنه على ذلك لشهيد وإنه له بالخير لشديد أفلا يعلم إذا بعثر ما في القبور. But does he not know that when the contents of the graves are scattered? So this is the last part, the resurrection. This is why some people thought it was from Mecca. Now again, that reoccurring theme of qabr, of the grave, of death, of the final destination. For a person who reads Quran regularly, he's always thinking about the hereafter. He's not attached to the world anymore. وَحُصِّلَ مَا فِي الصُّدُورِ. And that within the breast is contained. وَحُصِّلَ here can mean that whatever is in the breast, in the chest, can be expelled. Whatever intention he had, whatever he thought, whatever happened to his heart, it comes out. إِنَّ رَبَّهُمْ بِهِمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ لَخَبِيرٌ. Indeed, their Lord with them that day is fully acquainted, meaning that whatever we think of in our hearts, whatever is in our chests, and that day, the day of judgment, Allah will know. Therefore, we have to be here very, this final supplicate, this final part, be mindful that at the end we will reach the destination, and everything that is in our hearts, in our chest, Allah will know. We ask Allah, inshallah, to make us of those who are courageous when it comes to the challenges that we face, inshallah. That we will always be on the side of Amir al-Mu'mineen and his companions, inshallah. We ask Allah to give the followers of Imam Ali victory, inshallah. Give them patience and protection, inshallah. Ya Allah, we ask you to cure all the sick. Forgive our sins. Accept our worship, inshallah. And all of our marhumeen, may they be blessed with our remembrance of them, and to expedite the Imam of the age with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.